In the last episode, Lu Sheng caused a massive uproar at the Chen family estate, so much so that even the head of the Chen family was forced to show up. Just as Chen was about to put Lu Sheng in his place, at least that's what he thought he was going to do, General Du suddenly stepped in. He first saluted and showed our boy with the utmost respect. After seeing this, with his objective already achieved for the night, Lu Sheng decided there was no point in prolonging the drama and left with He Lingsu. Now, picking up where we left off, He Lingsu casually mentioned that by tomorrow, Lu Sheng would be all over the news. In response, he just chuckled and mumbled that was exactly what he wanted, but she didn't catch what he said. Either way, Lu Sheng just brushed it off, while telling her how he isn't usually like this. To prove his point, even the art style suddenly shifts to a dramatic JoJo vibe. Striking an exaggerated pose, he declared himself a reasonable, humble, and low-key guy, and today was an exception just for her. Of course, He Lingsu rolled her eyes, and clearly she wasn't buying it. She showed an expression pretty much screamed, "Sure, man." As they began leaving the place, Lu Sheng began to reflect on recent events. From baiting the Dark Demon Society, then killing Lien Su with his will projection, and finally, crashing the Chen family's party, it seemed like everything on his to-do list was checked off. Yet he couldn't shake this nagging feeling as if something was off. Perhaps he missed something important, but his immortal cells remained quiet, not signaling him any danger. Scratching his chin, he muttered to himself, maybe he's just overthinking it. Ahead, He Lingsu had wandered off a bit, so he called out to her, asking if she wanted to discuss the next supplement formula. In a split second, she spun around, her face lighting up like a kid on Christmas morning. She bolted toward him with such enthusiasm that Lu Sheng couldn't help but smile. The speed of her mood swing was impressive, and he couldn't resist thinking, this girl really has a thing for making supplements, doesn't she? The scene then shifts to another room, where Chen has invited General Du and Jiang He over for a private discussion. With a grateful tone, he thanked them for stepping in earlier, admitting that without their intervention, the Chen family might have been in serious trouble. Jiang He, ever composed, brushes it off as no big deal, but he offers a piece of advice. Believing blessings and misfortunes come hand in hand, he then suggests Chen take this opportunity to reorganize the family. He subtly hints at the fact that the girl by Lu Sheng's side is technically still part of their family. Handle things well, and he then trailed off. While Jiang He didn't finish his thought, his implication was crystal clear. General Du speaks up next, apologizing for not stepping in the very beginning. He was honestly stunned when he recognized General Lu. He even had to double-check before he could confirm it. He then becomes very serious as he informs Chen that there are things about Lu Sheng that are still classified, but all he can say is that General Lu's strength is far beyond what any of them could imagine. He even reveals that the military holds Lu Sheng's future in high regard. With that, he then shifts his gaze towards Jiang He, as he mentions how Lu Sheng might even reach the same level as the person backing Jiang He. The room fell silent, the two of them eyes wide in shock. Chen gulped hard, as he knew too well the person backing Jiang He was none other than Tan Zhongyu, one of the nation's 3 martial saints. Did this mean Lu Sheng really has the potential to one day match a martial saint? Chen quickly realized he had underestimated Lu Sheng big time. General Du, sensing he may have said too much, calmly sets his teacup down and says, that's all he will say for now, and he should get going. Chen snaps out of his daze and quickly offers to see him out, leaving Jiang He alone in the room. Jiang He can't help but marvel at the young boy he once knew. But how did this young boy manage to rise to such incredible heights in such a short time? He knows this is something that must be reported to the martial saint. Then again, he thought for a moment, perhaps the martial saint already knows. The scene shifts again. Outside a hotel, Lu Sheng and He Lingsu part ways. Before leaving, he had already given her the formula for the newest supplement. Back in his own room, Lu Sheng steps onto the balcony and gazes at the brightly lit city under the night sky. The reason he gave her the formula was simple. Their pharmaceutical company had grown to a point where it needed a truly high-end product to make a statement. Secondly, choosing to stand firmly by his side, even when the world seemed against him, had proven her self-loyalty. With that in mind, his thoughts drift to Lin Zhe, that chubby little firecracker who once stood up during the freshman assembly to hurl insults at anyone who dared question him. The memory made Lu Sheng chuckle softly. It had been a while since someone showed that kind of guts. Thinking about Lin Zhe, Lu Sheng decides it's about time he reconnects with some old friends in the coming days. He then pulled out the small vial of Saint's demise, turning it over in his hand thoughtfully. Despite its terrifying reputation, said to be lethal enough to kill even a martial saint, he realized he'd never properly studied it. He had read about it in the dream realm before, and it was indeed terrifying. Even in the martial year 10,000, this poison could still deal catastrophic damage to some of the top martial artists. Rumors even claimed it had once brought down a 10th level. Staring at the small bottle for what felt like an eternity, his curiosity got the better of him. A wild idea popped into his head. What if he tested it on himself? After all, if this poison could take down a martial saint but not him, wouldn't that technically make him tougher than a 9th level? Thinking it through, he reasoned that after reaching the 7th level, Grandmasters would become immune to over 90% of poisons thanks to their superhuman physique. By then, their immune system and cellular regeneration are hundreds of times stronger than an average human, and their cells metabolize toxins at speeds that would break any lab equipment. Most poisons would barely have a chance to act before being neutralized or expelled. Even if this poison managed to work, the damage would probably heal in no time. According to the Fire Seed database, the toxin extracted from 9th level beasts works on a level deeper than just genetics. But what did deeper than genetics even mean? Determined to find out, he decided to do something that no one would ever do. Seriously, do not try this at home. The toxin was said to cause irreversible cellular damage, though he wasn't too worried because he knew his cells would eventually evolve into immortal cells anyway. Of course, he wasn't reckless and stupid. Anyway. At least he doesn't plan to drink the whole vial. He used his psychic energy to extract a minuscule portion, 10,000th of a drop. He then diluted it in a glass of water. To his surprise, even his psychic power couldn't detect anything unusual about the liquid. No wonder it could fool even martial saints. Feeling a mix of weird emotions, Lu Sheng gulped down the water and, for good measure, crunched the glass cup to pieces and swallowed that too. He figured any poison residue clinging to the cup might contaminate it for the next guest. Better to destroy it now. The guy literally drank level 8 beast fluid before. So what the big deal with a glass? Anyway, as he waited, he felt his stomach heat up like a furnace. Using his psychic force, he observed his body internally. He quickly noticed a dark energy forming and then started attacking his cells, or more precisely, it was trying to corrode them, but his own cells were fighting back, trying to kick the toxin out. He kinda understands how this works. So basically, when the toxin enters the body, it triggers a battle between the person's cells and the beast's genetic remnants. This forced the body toward an unpredictable mutation. The cells resisted with all they could, however, because the beast's genes were ferociously invasive, which will heavily affect the person and even potentially lead to the mutation of cells. This also explained what happened to the martial maniacs he had encountered back in the caverns. They must have been victims of this similar kind of corruption. However, since he'd only used a minuscule dose, it was equivalent to eating a piece of level 7 beast meat. Thanks to his incredibly strong body, the discomfort passed quickly, and his cells completely destroyed the toxin. But something didn't add up. The database claimed the toxin worked on a level beyond genetics. What could that even mean? Was the true danger hidden in what came after the cell got corroded? Driven by his growing curiosity, our boy decided to push things further. He made a small cut on his palm with his fingers, then extracted a full drop of the poison and let it seep into the wound. This time, the reaction was immediate. His entire hand erupted with black energy. His body resisted with all its strength, battling the toxins. But just like before, his cells were in the upper hands, and just as the toxins were getting destroyed again, a wild idea struck him. What if he helped the toxin win? By the name of science, he gave the toxin a little push. It didn't take long for him to notice something unusual about his hand. Not only the toxins had gotten into his body, but his wound also completely healed. But then it came to the forbidden manicure where sharp black nails began forming on his fingers. Then, out of nowhere, an eye sprouted from the back of his hand, staring directly at him. Wait a minute, did we grab the wrong script? Are we gonna see his hand start talking and reading books, then help him fight later on? Anyway, let's get back to the story. The bizarre transformation also filled his hand with rather explosive power, yet despite his efforts to help the toxin, the mutation only advanced up to his wrist. Beyond that, his body's immense strength blocked it completely. Curious, he flicked his finger lightly. A powerful energy shot out, and the desk in front of him was instantly shredded into several pieces. Even Lu Sheng was slightly shocked. All he did was flick his finger. Yet he wasn't expecting this kind of destructive power. It rivaled, and in some ways even exceeded, the power of his stellar immortal body. At the same time, he could sense destructive and chaotic energy coursing through his hand, all concentrated in the mutated cells. It reminded him of his immortal cells, but there was a stark difference. While immortal cells symbolized immortality, these mutated cells represented pure destruction. Either way, both were leagues beyond ordinary human cells. This also explains why the beasts were so powerful. His immortal cells had gone through countless evolutions to reach their current state, while mutating his entire hand hadn't even required 1,000,000 transformations. Then, an idea struck him. What if he focused all this mutated energy on a single cell? If it underwent billions of transformations just like immortal cells, could he create something on par with immortal cells, but at the opposite extreme? A cell dedicated to ultimate destruction? He imagined the possibility that perhaps he could get rid of the bad stuff while exploring a new pinnacle of physical evolution, while still retaining his human form. But before he could dwell on it further, his hand suddenly erupted with searing pain. The once vital and powerful hand began to wither and collapse, the mutated cells rapidly decaying and being expelled from his body. Within moments, his hand began healing by his immortal cells, then quickly returned to its original state, as if nothing had happened. What the hell was that? Why did those cells only survive for such a short time? He understands the vitality of immortal cells was infinitely times greater than that of ordinary cells. While the mutated cells couldn't match that level of resilience, their lifespan shouldn't have been so short-lived either. Then an idea stuck with him. Could it be some kind of rule? Perhaps his earlier theory was flawed, or maybe he wasn't able to use it on life forms in this world because of the rules. It was like how modern firearms were ineffective against high-level beasts, and how the beasts' true powers were suppressed. This is all because of the rules. This toxin, poison, or whatever you want to call it, after ingesting it, causes the host cells to corrode and mutate, and these mutated cells will inevitably rapidly collapse. It wasn't a question of how strong one's body was. Whether 9th level or even 10th level, it was impossible for them to withstand the forced eradication by the rules. In other words, it wasn't the toxin that killed the host. It was the rules. But if that was the case, could he still find a way to harness it? Oof, seems like we will never catch our boy slacking. He will try everything to get stronger. Suddenly, a surge of overwhelming energy erupted within his body. He immediately sensed danger. This power was far too intense to keep building uncontrollably. Just like before, he shattered his own blood core as if forming an immortal cell. The rush of blood energy swept through his body again and again until, finally, turning into his 8th immortal cell. Taking a deep breath, he couldn't help but wonder where that energy had come from. Though he didn't need to think too hard, the answer was obvious. It had to be the saint's demise. Even though the mutated cells were obliterated by the power of the rules, the raw energy they contained remained. Glancing back at the vial in his hand, a realization dawned on him. If just one drop held such immense energy, then the entire bottle could be an unparalleled resource for energy. Wasting no time, Lu Sheng repeated his earlier process. The results, however, were surprisingly different. Each time he experimented, his hand took on a new, bizarre form. Yes, you heard that right. Take a look here. This looks oddly like the Parasite anime. Anyway, let's not lose track here. He then tried it again, and this time it was a different mutation. Finally, after several trials, he sat on the ground, catching his breath. The experiments made him consider something even crazier. What if he pushed a single cell to its absolute limit of mutation? Even if the rules tried to suppress him, so what? Rules were meant to be broken. If the rules can affect him, he thought, then it only proves one thing, which is that he was not strong enough yet. The scene shifts to a distant snowy mountain. Meanwhile, 2 climbers make their way toward the summit. One of them remarked, "So the rumors about an otherworldly peak above Tian Shan Mountain are true." The other shook his head and then pointed to the distance, saying this doesn't even count as the true peak. The real summit lies far above them. Suddenly, one of them noticed a large stone nearby. On its surface were carved the words, "God among men. Mortals, turn back." The words suddenly reminded them one of their nation's martial saints was constantly training somewhere in the mountains, and this must have been the place. At the mountaintop, A young man respectfully bowed as a group of black-clad individuals slowly put down a casket. The young man informs that they have brought the body of the fifth lady. Moments later, a man spoke questioning if he knew how she died. The young man replied that her neck was snapped, and she died instantly. He then detailed everything Liansu had done in recent times, leaving nothing out. After hearing the full story, the Jidao martial saint, we should call him Zhao Ji, sighed deeply. She made too many mistakes. She deserved her fate, Zhao Ji said. The young man next to him interjected, calling Zhao Ji Lord, and explained the lady's adversary was 1,000 kilometers away when she died, but he was certain Lu Sheng was definitely involved in this, or at least had some connections. Zhao Ji waved dismissively, saying, "Since she's dead, just leave it at that." The young man's expression twisted in frustration. Believing the lady's death is an insult to the Lord, not to mention they all know it was Lu Sheng's doing. Zhao Ji placed a firm hand on the young man's shoulder, asking what is he suggesting. Should he disregard all costs just to hunt him down for revenge? The young man hesitated but didn't say anything. Zhao Ji then shook his head, saying, although he's a 9th-level martial saint, he is nowhere near God among men. There are rules, and everyone, including him, must abide by them. He explained that Lu Sheng is the military's top prodigy. If they make a move, the military will do everything in their power to protect him. Besides, there's no direct evidence tying him to this. Reluctantly, the young man bowed his head, saying he understood. Zhao Ji turned back to the body of Liansu, his hand gently brushing her already stiff cheek. Still, he won't let this matter end here, and he will certainly have the military pay a hefty price for this. Just as he spoke, his expression changed sharply. He trembled as he extended his psychic energy to examine Liansu's abdomen. For a moment, time itself seemed to freeze. Then, in a voice thick with disbelief, Zhao Ji murmured, "So, I, Zhao Ji, once had a child." As the words left his lips, although they sounded calm, a powerful energy erupted from him, and soon his body dissipated into nothingness. From the void, a shadowy figure slowly emerged, stepping out of the void, its aura so overwhelming that those nearby dropped to the ground in terror.